Oh, they're not ready yet. Okay. I guess I'm before. Forget that. Okay, I got the thumbs up, so I guess we're ready to start. We welcome you here today. Appreciate your being here. And we'll proceed. We have an agenda as outlined, and we'll proceed with the agenda today. We'll call the meeting to order. And first of all, look at the minutes and ask for motion on the minutes if there's any.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make the motion that we approve the minutes.
Hey, it's been recommended we approve the minutes by Jim and seconded by Blaine. All in favor?
Aye.
Or any opposed? Not, they'll stand as written. So, we have a water supply report. Troy, are you time to give that for us? Sure. Well, step up and we'll enjoy.
Okay. That's the plan.
We've been enjoying the snow. Even down in southeast Utah, we got some snow.
That's right. I never knew it'd feel so good to be average.
Yeah.
That's all we pray for, Troy. Just be average.
So yeah, this year has been a surprisingly normal year. So the graph on the right and the graph on the left. So the one that's all red, that was this time last year, and the one on that has green and blue, that's current conditions for the snowpack in Utah this year, as of January 31st. We are doing pretty much, we could say across the board, we're doing double the snowpack what we had last year, other than the Bear River Basin. That would be phenomenal if last year was a normal year. But as it was, last year was half the snowpack, and so we are tracking right along on a normal year this year. The basin ranges from anywhere from 88% and 83 are two outliers for the Bear and Escalante, but the remaining basins are all well within and above average for the snowpack. So things are so far looking really, really good. Precipitation for to date, cumulative for the state is also looking very good. Some areas well above average and pretty much average across the state or better. So when we're looking at the state, this is basically a snow water equivalent graph here of the state average across all the basins. And currently we're at 101% across the state. And the percent of normal peak is at 62%. So that means we have achieved 62% of the snowpack and only have another 38% to reach the normal peak SWE for the state. And so all these basins are over 50% of snowpack right now. And so we've got over half the snowpack in most of the basins. And so that's very good, especially when you compare it to last year, where it was tracking along as the worst snowpack on record for SNOTEL, and actually bumped up a little bit towards the end. But with half the snowpack and then a really dry summer, we ended up with one of the worst records on water years on record. So currently, our snow water equivalent from across the state is about almost 10 inches, and last year at this time was about 5.5 inches. So things are substantially better than where they were last year. So we can break it down by the basins, and we'll start in the Bear River. The Bear's at 88%. So the Bear hasn't been benefiting from all the storms that we've been getting, like the remaining basins south of the Bear. The storms have been coming along pretty well and pretty much blanketing across the whole state fairly consistently, but the Bear has been left out a little bit because it's a little too far north. So when we look at the projection for the Bear, this is the 50% So we have 50% chance of achieving this. If we continue with the 50% chance for the bear, it will not quite reach the peak normal in that basin. Now the 70% chance, which is, this is your actually 30% chance that we would achieve normal peak SWE for the Bear River. Now that's only really for the Bear and Escalante itself. The remaining basins, we are still looking at a 50% chance. So the Northeast Uintas is at about 103%, and it's at 55% of the normal peak SWE. And if we keep going along the way we've been going, it will really hit the normal line for this. And this, you'll see this kind of pattern just about for all the basins as we go through them. And so for the Weber Ogden River, we're at 106. It's already achieved 65% of the peak SWE, so it only has 35% left to go. This graph here shows last year. And last year, just about all these basins were tracking with the worst snowpack, and then they bumped up a little bit towards the end, and so it wasn't quite the worst snowpack on record. But again, the summer just added insult to injury, and we end up with a bad water year. So 50% normal, we got a 50-50 chance of reaching a normal peak SWE and a little bit above. Duchesne River is at 113% normal. Again, it's tracking much better than last year. And if we continue on this pattern, we'll achieve above average peak SWE for the Duchesne. The Provo, Jordan, it's at 105. And you can see that drop down a little bit. So the last 7 to 10 days has been a bit of a dry period, but we're also looking at a pretty good storm coming in this weekend. And it looks like it's going to go through Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And so we anticipate that we'll get a nice bump in all these basins for the SWE, for the snowpack. So last year, again, tracking down low, and the 50% projection has us tracking right along with a normal season. Oops, sand pitch is at 114%. Sand pitch last year was at a horrible drought area, and it was extreme drought there in the sand pitch, so it's nice to see they're getting some snow. They're at 114%, and they've already achieved 70% of their snowpack, and so another 30%, and they'll be at the normal peak. So if we continue with the 50% projection, we'll actually achieve a higher peak SWE for the sand pitch area as well, which is great for down there. That's what we like to see. Price River is at 115%. Price really significantly better than last year. It's well over half of double the snowpack from last year. And again, if we track along at 50% projection, we'll be above average peak SWE there. And Lower Sevier, we had 122%, which is great. You can see it flattened out a little bit. So we anticipate again that we'll see a bump in the SWE over the next few days there. This is last year, and if we 50% projection tracks us pretty well above the normal SWE. Upper Sevier, 111%, 68% of the snowpack, and that's looking good down there. As we go further south, the Beaver's at 108%. It's achieved 65%, so it only has another 35% to go there to reach the normal peak SWE. And the 50% projection has us tracking right along normal. Southeast, 115%, way better than last year. And it's only got another 30% to go for the snowpack there. And finally, the southwestern area is at 106%, and it's tracking pretty well for normal snowpack as well. So across the state, it's almost unusual to see a normal snowpack, because over the last 10 years or so, we've seen one extreme or the other. Unfortunately, we've been seeing the worst extremes more often than the above normal snowpack. So it's kind of peculiar almost to see a normal snowpack. but that is what we're experiencing this year. Now, when we look at the soils, the Bear River, so the soil saturation, we like to keep an eye on that for the basins because that will ultimately affect the efficiency of the runoff for the spring when the snow starts melting out. So ideally, we like to see a supersaturated soil, soils in the mountains, and that's a good indicator that we'll get a nice efficient runoff once the snowpack starts coming off. So as you can see in the Bear, it's actually below average there for the soil saturations. And last year at this time, it was above average. So we might see a lower snowpack in the Bear River as well as a less efficient runoff. But it could still bounce back. The Bear's at 88%, and it could still recover. Weber Ogden, again, that one's below normal for soil saturation, and last year it was a little higher. So again, we might see a little bit less efficient runoff there as well. As we start working our way south, we start seeing a little more improvement in the soil saturation. The Provo Jordan is tracking right along normal, and last year it was lower than normal. So that's good to see there. And as we work our way down south, Sand Pitch is above normal, and it was very dry down in Sand Pitch. So that's good news for the Sand Pitch, and as we work our way south, we'll see a lot of the other soils, well, except for the Upper Sevier, it's a little below, but it was also much below more normal last year. So we're seeing an improvement in the soils saturations as we work our way south, and that's exceptionally good for the reservoirs that are really dry and need to see a rebound in the reservoir levels come to spring. Southwest is much improved from last year. So reservoir storage, pretty much across the state, we're currently at much lower levels than what we would normally see on an average. And that's no surprise considering how dry it was last year and the poor runoff that we had. And so many of the reservoirs are in dire need of replenishing their water in the reservoirs themselves. So without, I have to say with the exception of Bear River, of the Bear Lake and the Strawberry Reservoir, those two reservoirs, they're very large, and they're actually almost right along with what the average levels would be this time of year. But again, when they start drying down, it takes that much more of a snowpack for them to rebound. And so it's good that they're above normal because they might actually not achieve as much of a runoff and increase in their reservoir storage. But many of the other reservoirs, like Gunnison, is completely dry. And there's a good chance if we get a normal peak SWE, we'll see Gunnison recover completely. And Paiute is very low as well. That's a 70,000 acre foot reservoir down south. That will hopefully see a nice rebound as well. So looking forward, NOAA predicts this is a 6 to 10 day outlook for precipitation. So the 6 to 10 day outlook is above normal precipitation for all of Utah. Now looks great. We looked 8 to 14 day. We're still looking pretty good. Above normal chance of precipitation across Utah. And then looking at the 3-month outlook, it's equal chances. For some reason, there's a nice above average right over Colorado, so maybe we'll benefit from that. But again, this is a 3-day outlook, so this 3-month outlook. Back in December when they had a 3-month outlook, it wasn't looking all that rosy for Utah, and we've done pretty well. So I want to put a lot of faith in a 3-month outlook by any means. So in summary, we are tracking right along for no more snowpack. It ranges from 83% to 115% across the state. Most of the basins are 100 or above, and so that's fantastic. Our cumulative precipitation ranging from 93 to 133% of average. Soil saturation is a bit drier in the north than what we'd like to see, but it's wetter in the south. And across the state, we're at 50% of soil saturation compared to 44% last year. The reservoirs are below normal, and that's not surprising. We all know what the summer was like, and there was heavy use on the reservoirs. Hopefully, with the normal snowpack continuing, if we achieve a normal snowpack this year, a lot of these reservoirs will, especially in the south, it'll go a long ways to help them recover. So the short term, the above normal precipitation outlook looks good, but we're at equal chances for the 3-month outlook. And Randy always liked to say EC actually, instead of equal chances, was equally clueless. So, and I agree, because that's a 3-month outlook, so that's a long ways out. That's all I got. It was good news, though, and I hope it keeps going. Again, we got an ice storm that looks like it's shaping up for the weekend. This dry period sort of plateaued our accumulation, but I expect to see a nice snowpack up to 12 inches in many of the mountain areas. So, any questions?
Very good. Thank you, Troy.
You bet.
Troy, could I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, you know, we've seen these storms coming across fairly regularly, and last number of years we've had these high pressures that have parked and kept those storms out. Are we seeing any kind of bigger systems or El Nino or something out there that's helping?
The last I checked was there's a weak El Nino in effect, but that seems to have sort of dissipated a little bit, because the 3-month outlook created by NOAA isn't really you normally see above average precipitation down south and drier north, warmer north. So short answer is no. It looks pretty good. We've been really fortunate here so far, as you know, we got this storm pattern. We're getting a nice storm every 7 to 10 days, and we have 3 or 4 dry days, and then we get a storm coming in. And so far, if that pattern's set up, and if once it's set up, it's more likely to continue. But again, we have seen years in the past where we'll have a good December, January, and then it just shuts off and we get a high pressure system. So I wish I could say that's not going to happen, but it's probably right now it's a 50% chance. And we just completed January. We still have February and March, and I'd say half of April to go to accumulate more snow, or we could get shut out and we might not see much improvement at all. So hopefully it won't go that way.
Thank you, Troy.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Okay, folks, let's move into our report section, the feasibility reports. We have with us for the Peoa South Bench Canal and Irrigation Company, we have David Lake, who's the president, and Aaron Dieter. Brian Dieter, the engineer. Like to come on up? We'll be glad to entertain you. Jacqueline, I think you're going to make a presentation to the board, so.
The Peoa South Bench Irrigation and Canal and Irrigation Company was incorporated in 1926, and it's comprised of 28 shareholders and 855 acres. They received financial assistance from the board in 2011 to replace their diversion dam and restore the river channel. Their proposed project is to replace the current inline canal system, which is depicted in the blue line on the map there, to a pressurized system, which would consist of approximately 4,900 feet of 32-inch HDPE pipe, which is depicted by the purple line, and about 14,800 feet of 27-inch PIP PVC pipe, which is depicted by the dashed red line on your map there. The pressurized system would follow a modified alignment along existing property lines, and it would also incorporate a metering station and an underwater microhydro turbine. In 2017, the NRCS performed a water loss study where they determined that approximately 2,629 acre feet of water are lost through their system through seepage. And a typical irrigation season is from May to August. However, in the past few years, they've only had water up until June. So this first picture here is was taken at their diversion dam. And then these next two pictures are at the beginning of their system, and there's a lot of debris throughout their system. And then these are the conditions towards the end of their system. So benefits of the project would be that it would conserve an estimated 2,629 acre feet of water annually that is currently lost through seepage. It would allow their shareholders to use their full allocation and extend their irrigation season, and it would reduce operation and maintenance costs. Staff recommends that the board authorize 44.5% of the project cost up to $1,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 25 years with annual payments of approximately $40,000. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, let me repeat that. Sorry. Staff recommends the board authorize 44.5% of the project cost up to $1 million, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 25 years with annual payments of approximately $40,000. I apologize for that mistake. That is staff's report.
Not much difference between 1,000.
No, it's not a big difference.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Mr. Lake?
Yes.
Folks would like to add or subtract or multiply or divide?
No, that's pretty much what it is. We're probably going to not put HDPE up at the top because we're going to try to go with less expensive and go straight. And we're working on obtaining easements where we go across people's property. Part of that, the people up there are sad to lose the canal because it's going through their property and they think it's aesthetic beauty for the. And so I've been in negotiations with them and talked with the, who's the company down there? Weber Basin Water. And our plan is to put our excess water back into the canal for the distance where that HDPE was going to go, and then put it back into the Weber River. And they are encouraging that because it puts it past the Provo diversion, that we'll be able to put it back down into Weber Basin, which they really believe that's their water in the first place. And so we're trying to do that to cut cost. We've also, last year, we doubled we heft up a significant assessment so that we could start banking our money. We've got between 30 and 40,000 last year, and we'll do the same again this year, maybe even a little more. We might up it some more, and we'll to help us to defray our portion of the cost that we have to take out of pocket. That's, I don't know, it's just a headache, but we need it. 48% water loss is what we're experiencing.
A lot.
Yeah. And there's also there's the dangers of the open canal because it's going by subdivisions and an Oakley school that was up there. And so the liability's been a major concern to us. Runs along the highway. A few years ago, the canal was compromising the highway to the point that if you stepped on the asphalt, water would shoot up through the asphalt. And we put in $10,000 of liner in that area so that the water wouldn't leak through that, but it's been a constant battle to keep that. And then there's people that are complaining about water in their basements and whatnot throughout the town. And we're also trying to negotiate with the town. It's still negotiation. They haven't committed to come into our project to eliminate. They're currently doing their watering of the rodeo arena up there and all the properties with culinary water. And we feel we have an ability to deliver them some secondary water so that they could come in and help participate in the cost of this project. But that hasn't materialized as yet, but they are in the current status of running a feasibility study of that to see if that will work. Eventually, they're going to want on because this system will benefit the whole of the community of Oakley and the farmers that are using it. I don't know what else you want me to say, but.
If there aren't any questions, then I'm prepared to make a motion, and that would be motion would be the board authorize 44.5% of the project cost up to $1 million, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 25 years with annual payments of approximately $40,000.
Al's made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second to the motion.
Motion's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate your help. And we appreciate Jackie.
Next project is the West Cache Irrigation Company. We have Mike Spackman, Vice President, Randy Utley, Manager, Sid Merck, Board Member, David Larson, Board Member, Scott Archibald, Engineer. Welcome you, gentlemen. Russell, you're going to give the report, I believe, on this. So.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this project is located between the towns of Trenton and Newton in Cache County. The applicant provides irrigation water to approximately 14,200 acres through 50 miles of open earthen ditch. Water is diverted from the Bear River near Riverdale, Idaho, with the ditch ending at Cutler Reservoir near Newton, Utah. Many of the farmlands are irrigated with privately owned pumps, providing pressurized water to pivots and wheel lines. It is estimated that almost 1/3 of the applicant's water is lost to seepage and weed growth in the earthen ditch. The ditch must be kept nearly full in order to reach shareholders at Newtontown, near Newtontown. Last 5 miles of the ditch, known as the Newton Lateral, provides water to 26 shareholders, irrigating 2,856 acres. These shareholders use 23 privately owned pump stations to provide pressurized water to their agricultural properties. The pump stations pump from the ditch into about 10 miles of on-farm irrigation pivots and wheel lines. The applicant is requesting financial assistance from the board to pipe the last 5.3 miles of the West Cache ditch in the Newton Lateral and install 2 large electric pump stations to replace the 23 small pump stations, and new flow meters will also be installed. The project will serve 2,856 acres of the applicant's 14,200 total acres. Here's a few pictures of the system. As you can see in the map, the red shows where the ditch will be piped down by Newton, town of Newton. Here's up the upper part by Trenton. You can see it's a really pretty large canal, very weedy. Okay, this is where the upper pump station will be placed. This is the top, where the top of the system, new system will be. All right. This is about halfway through the system. Their canal, again, most of it is about that size down in the lower part. Whoop. Next. Okay, this is one of their pump stations that's going to be removed. If you try to imagine, you can see a pump in there. Against the wall there, you can see the service panels, and I didn't want to get any closer because I didn't want it to come down on me. Okay, this is the lower station. This is at Cutler Reservoir. You can see that power pole down there is where the new pump station is going to go in, the large one. And they're going to have to buy a little bit of property there, so got a little bit of cost on here to buy that property. Benefits of the project are a conservation of about 2,352 acre-feet, 134,000 kilowatt hours of electrical savings valued at $10,300 per year, provide the shareholders with more reliable pressurized system. Metering will allow better monitoring and reduce overwatering. There will be reduced operation and maintenance costs. There will be reduced weed and moss killer used in the ditch, and it'll reduce the impacts of drought. Okay, the cost of the project is estimated at a total of $3,500,000. They have received a WaterSmart grant of $1 million, and they're requesting 85% of the non-grant amount, or $2,125,000 from the board. Staff recommends the board authorize 60.7% of the project cost, up to $2,125,000, and the project be purchased at 1% interest over approximately 17 years with annual payments of $141,500. That is staff's report.
Thank you, Russell. You gentlemen have any comments or anything you'd like to add, or?
In our proposal, due to the fact that this farm ground is good to fair farm ground, we would like to propose that we could extend that interest over a 30-year period to give these farmers opportunity to be able to continue to sustain life on their farms and still pay off this project, just due to the rolling hill terrain and the some of it somewhat marginal farm ground. I think that would be our biggest concern.
If you were projected out at 17 years, if you want to ask for 30,
yes,
something less than that, would you be amenable to that?
Well, we're beggars. We'll take what we can get. It would be a lot more feasible for these farmers to farm this type of soil and be able to continue to sustain life and their families on their farms. We've thought this through a lot, and we're already putting a lot of financial pressure on the farmers by doing this, but we think it's a great conservation project. It'll save us one third of the water going down there. There are farms that haven't been farmed for 40 years along there due to the seepage of the West Cache Irrigation Company. We've used different products to try to seal the ditch. Haven't had a lot of success with it. So it's a great conservation project that we have encouraged the landowners to participate in. They've come forth eager to sacrifice a lot of their annual income to make this project work, and in their behalf, 30 years would be really a big benefit for them.
Could I make a quick comment in here? If you go back to the original slide, this land that we're talking about floats down into the bottom of Cache Valley, which the lower half of it is a Trenton Series clay soil type. Part of the problem with this is it takes, I guess Dad and Uncle say it, you got about a 30-minute period to work it and make it so you can grow. And the upper one, you know, the 17 to 25-year range would be pretty feasible. But when you get down into this lower section of soil, sometimes it's even hard to get planted. So it's to the benefit of the whole if we back it out and let the people that, you know, have not as good of soil be able to take advantage of the system too. It actually would help them get the water they need at the right times also. So that's part of the reason we're trying to push it back, is for those that don't have quite as good of margins, that it makes it feasible for them also to be able to do it.
Any other comments from you folks? Questions from the board?
I have a couple of questions. Back to the comment that was just made. What percentage of the project involves that type of ground that you're talking about?
You go about a half mile up along the railroad track there, and I have not actually put the exact number to it.
Ballpark?
But ballpark, and I was gonna say somewhere between 25 and a third of the project that goes between the Newton Road and down, like I say, it goes clear down. We're watering within about a half block of the water in the bottom of the valley up there. And the further down the hill you go, of course, the less quality of the soil, but the more important to get the water on it at the right times, which this will very much help them out. But until it actually happens, I can't give them exact, you know, number of how much more they're going to be able to grow. The upper side, I don't have any problems knowing that with the other projects that's gone in with Cache Valley, it'll be very beneficial to them. And I've told the farmers, and we've talked, that they could pay off faster, but this actually would let the ones that are in the most dire circumstances of farming have the option of taking a little bit longer. Does that make sense?
Another question, if I might, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned, or was mentioned in there, that you're going to need to acquire some land associated with the new pumping stations.
That is correct.
How much ground, and do you anticipate any problems with that acquisition?
Go ahead. This is Scott, our engineer.
Yeah, we're anticipating just like a quarter acre of land, and we've preliminarily talked with him, and he's part of the system, and he's eager to make it happen. I don't anticipate a problem. It's not on, you know, someone's land that's controversy to the project.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question or two. Water rights for this. The water right is an Idaho water right, it appears. Your service area of your company, are any of your acres that are served by your company in Idaho, or are they all in Utah?
There are some in Idaho.
Out of the company total, how much roughly?
Percentage, and say 20, maybe 20%.
Okay. Do you have any loans with the Idaho equivalent of this board for where you've pledged your water right as security?
No.
As far as with the water savings, are you spanning your acreage above and beyond decreed or certificated limits, or what are your plans there?
No, there won't be an expansion on the West Cache Irrigation Company's bylaws will not let us extend water rights beyond the property that it's assigned to.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions or suggestions, and I was just going through the numbers, but if we extended it to a 25-year loan
it would be just over $35 a share per year. And if we go to 30, it'd be about $29.50 an acre per year. And you'd pay off at year 2050, I think, and 2045 with the other one. As a board, we discussed in the briefing meeting these different scenarios. And typically, we don't go beyond 25 years. You know, I don't know what your comfort level is. Your payback would be $2.5 million on a 25-year loan, be $2,520,000 on a 30-year for that additional 5 years. So it'd be $20,000 more you'd pay back for that 5 years. Oh, if you've examined those numbers, but
we have looked at those numbers. We could probably live with the 25. We're just trying to assist some of the farmers that are struggling there.
Yeah,
That's their only concern in this. I know that the numbers aren't overwhelming there for the savings for an extra 5 years, but that's what the farmers have recommended that we ask for. So we're just here on their behalf, but I think we could live with the 25.
or about a $5.50 per year
Per share.
payback. Okay, with that, Dave? Are you the only one that's involved, Dave?
Well, I just had the opportunity because we went out before we come to this meeting to talk to all the farmers.
Right.
And most of them that have that soil type I wanted to say, wanted it down around $20 a share, which would be where we're at. If we go up 5, that puts it to $25 a share, which now it starts making them really have to have some doubts and concerns. Like I say, the ones on the upper side where the soil type's a lot better, I didn't get much pushback from. But anytime you get down into Trenton series and your window to farm it is shrunk up, the ability to use extra water to make it go becomes a lot more difficult for them. And that was the pushback, was to try to get it right there around that $20 number. And so as we move up to the 50, right now, the numbers we had 74% of the people that were going to be involved in this all vote for the project. As we move up to the 25 or 26, $5.50 more, I don't know what that'll affect the numbers. I do know a couple of them says don't go over this, which will put them on the other side of the fence. And for me, I would rather keep everybody sort of happy. I would take the 25-year back to them and say this is what we got, and then we can re-vote on it. But I do know at the 30-year level, some of them said, well, can we pay it off early? I said, sure. And some of them says, what if I can't pay it? I said, you probably can, because of you get out over 15 years, then your inflation rates will come up, your crops will be worth more, it'll make it more. I says, you got to get through this first 5 to 10 years, and then we probably do it. And most of them at the 30, like I said, I've got 100% vote in on 74% of the stock saying yes, and I have not received anybody saying no at the 30-year. At a 25, I don't know. I know I will lose 2% right now off the top because it said on my thing that if it goes up more than $3, forget it. So that's why I push a little bit more for that lower number or higher number of years, just to give everybody the same opportunity and keep a consensus in the canal that it is a good thing.
Any other questions from the board?
Ready? Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that the board authorize 60.7% of the project cost up to $2,125,000, and that the project be purchased at 1% over approximately 30 years with
84.
84?
84,000?
84,000 per year. I don't know if I'll get a second on that.
Annual payments. Approximately.
Lack a second, it appears, so change your motion, Mr. Holcomb.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion that board authorize 60.7% of the project cost up to $2,125,000, and that the project be purchased at an interest rate of 1% over approximately 17 years with annual payments of $100,000. Is that correct, Russell?
25.
No.
We're
25 years, it'd be $100,000?
Yes.
You'd said 17?
I mean 25 years.
Okay.
25 years. Excuse me. Correct my motion to state 25 years at a $100,000 payment. Is that what your numbers were this morning?
Yes.
We have a second to that motion. Second, Juliet? Lane? Questions on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, 25 years.
Thank you for your time.
And you guys got to realize this water you're saving isn't going to go to Bear River Canal Company, and they're here today. So you're really cutting my throat, guys.
We won't tell them.
Thanks, Randy.
Okay, we will move on the agenda to the committal of funds. First project up would be Payson City.
Yeah, go ahead.
Steve Russell, you're going to do this one also. Do we have any representatives from Payson City?
No.
No representatives from Payson City. Let's go ahead, Russell.
No, none of the numbers have changed for Payson, and this is a committal of funds, so they weren't required to be here today. Okay, Payson City. Purpose of the project is upgrade and expand the existing secondary irrigation system by redeveloping an existing well, upgrading its pump and motor controls, installing a secondary transmission pipe for the new development up in the Arrowhead development, installing a secondary pipe to isolate the outdoor recreation complex where they've got many acres of soccer fields and baseball fields. Also part of the project is to install 4,600 secondary meters on the secondary system throughout the city. These new facilities will provide secondary water to existing city recreational properties, new development, and future growth. And the cost estimate and sharing remain as authorized, with the board providing 85% of the cost of the project, or $8,985,000, out of a total project cost of $10,570,000. Staff recommends the board commit 85% of the project cost, up to $8,985,000, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 20 years with annual payments of approximately $526,000, including reserves.
Any questions on that?
Of those 4,600 meters, it summarizes them as to what they will be used for between new development, existing development, recreation. Have a number of what that represents?
Yeah, it's new development for past several years. They've already got a couple of hundred meters installed. All new development has had to put meters on the secondary system, and this will put meters on everything else over a period of about 2 or 3 years for the installation of it. It's going to cover every other bit of the secondary water, from the parks to the recreation complex, churches, everywhere there's anybody on the secondary system is about to get metered. So.
Get metered, will they also get charged, or do we know yet?
Oh, if the city was here, they would tell you eventually they are going to go to tiered rate structure, but how far down the line they want to get everybody hooked on first and go a couple of years, letting people get used to the fact that they're on a meter. And I believe they're going to be originally doing it kind of informational, letting people know what they're using, and then how many years down the line, I don't know, but they're going to be eventually going towards a tiered rate structure.
Questions from the board?
Chairman, make the motion that the board commits 85% of the project cost up to $8,985,000, and that the bond indemnities be returned at 1% interest over 20 years with an annual payment of approximately $526,000, including reserves.
Steve, motion by Steve. Questions on the motion? None. All in favor, say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
I could do it now. We have some guests present. We appreciate very much their being here. Dr. Eric Franson.
Let's see, is that a different agenda item?
I'm sorry, we're just reading some guests that we have. I got out of whack here. I got too quick.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm new at this.
Okay, no problem.
Mr. Franson is a principal with Franson Civil Engineers. We got Justin Atkinson, Sunrise Engineers.
Different project.
Different project.
Just introducing guests that are here.
Josh
the
Palmer
guests.
back with us, just to
Oh,
look,
I
see if we're still here. Alberta Rodriguez. Albert, not Alberta. I had an and Alberta, sorry. Nell Cook. Welcome. We welcome you and all of you here. Present staff and past staff, we welcome you. We move on now to Draper Irrigation Company. This is the David A. Gardner, Assistant General Manager.
Yes.
And Kent Ware, the President of the Draper Irrigation Company. We welcome you here today. And Tom, you're going to make a presentation to us, I guess. So.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the Draper Irrigation Company serves water to approximately 7,250 culinary water connections and 3,175 secondary pressurized irrigation connections in Draper City and the surrounding area. So if you look at the map, it shows the city boundaries in the black lines. Culinary water service area is the blue, and the pressurized irrigation, the secondary system service area, is the purple there. Water is obtained from several nearby drainages, and that water first goes to the culinary system, and if there's any excess, it is put into the pressurized irrigation system. And when that supply runs low, water is obtained from Utah Lake and the Jordan River via the East Jordan Canal. The water is pumped out of the canal into the system. The applicant recently completed a water rights master plan, which showed that there will be a shortage of secondary irrigation water in the secondary system prior to build out of their service area. And the company officials recognize that water conservation will play a major part in supplying that needed water, and a key to that is installing the water meters in the secondary irrigation system. And with that in mind, about 900 meters have been already placed on the system, and currently the unmetered connections are just assessed a monthly fee based on the lot size. But as meters are installed, the company starts providing them the usage information, and they give them 1 year to remain on the assessment based on a lot size, and then they go to a tiered irrigation system based on usage, where it has a base rate plus a couple tiers that increases with an increase in water use. The proposed project is to install about 2,100 meters on the secondary irrigation system, which would ultimately result in having basically almost all of their secondary irrigation system metered. The benefits of the project would be that about 97% of all residential secondary irrigation users will be metered. It's estimated that about 1,100 acre feet of water will be conserved annually. That's about 20%. It'll enable the widespread implementation of use-based water rates, and it will allow the applicant to better monitor their water use and manage their system better. The project cost is $4,530,000. They have obtained a $1 million WaterSmart grant, and it's proposed that the board provides 66.2% of the project cost, up to $3 million. And it's recommended that the board authorize and commit that 66.2% up to $1 million. And $3 million. Thank you. Don't want to be short there. And that the project be purchased at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $216,400. And it's anticipated the meters will be installed over 3 years. And that's staff's report.
And Mr. Gardner or Mr. Ware, do you have any comments or additions you'd like to make?
We appreciate you looking at this project. We want to be kind of in the lead of getting our system metered. We're watching the legislature and what's happening and want to lead out in getting our secondary system metered. The ones that we have metered, we've had quite a bit of success as people pay what they actually use instead of just an unknown amount. The reason we haven't put meters in the past is we've been working for about 7 years to find meters that would work in the system, and finally have found one, and we're happy with and putting a system in. It's an automated meter reading system that works really well, and we can monitor for leaks every day, tell them whether they have leaks so we can be proactive on that. We're using the same meter in our culinary system, and it works really well for us. We've been around since 1888. That wasn't in the report, and we have had loan. The original secondary system was paid. We got a loan from the Board of Water Resources from that, and Eric was our staff member at the time, so we've got a long history with it. So that's just a fun fact. That's all I have to say.
A little less gray hair?
Yes.
A little more hair. Any other comments? Yeah.
I've not been here with the company since 1888, but I can speak from the short years that I have been here. Our board is fully aware of this project and supports the recommendation, and we just appreciate your consideration. Thanks.
The question I had was the experience with the meters. What's the life of your meters? If you used them in your regular culinary system and now your secondary system, any idea on the life of them?
20 years is the battery life. They're guaranteed 100% for 10 years and then prorated over the next 10.
Well, I had a question that you've kind of answered relative to, and that was, what success have you seen with those? Has there been any for their water use based on the meter.
People have a tendency when they get a big bill to complain. And so there's a little pushback, but overall, we've had very little pushback. And in my book, when people pay for what they actually use is the only fair way to bill. When you have a flat rate, one person uses twice as much water, and that person that's using less water is supplementing all those that are overwatering.
Questions, Julia?
Actually, I had a question, but it's been sufficiently answered. I was trying to understand kind of the reliability of the meters, but if it's okay, Mr. Chair, may I make a comment?
Yes.
So, you know, studying economics, I'm an economist, and a big problem that we think a lot about is having information available. So I just wanted to thank you for taking steps and kind of being ahead of the game of making sure that you're providing information so people can make informed decisions about how much water they're using. And as you know, as a major population center, I'm hoping that what you're doing will catch on.
Yes, thank you. And one thing we're working on that isn't in the report, we want to put the information into our bill similar to what Jordan Valley is so they can see what they should be using and what they are using and probably what their neighbors, what it looks like where they fit in percentile in the community. We find, from what we understand from people, that is a tremendous aid in conservation.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question or two. What brand are these meters?
They're Badger.
Are they the Magmeter technology or what?
Yes.
And as far as your conservation estimate, which was 20%, does that come from your actual experience that once you started billing people and metering them, is that what you kind of came up with? That was from actual numbers, or where did you come up with that 20%?
We kind of looked at Weaver Basin's report and then tried to be a little bit conservative on that. And so that was the basis of coming up with that conservation number. I think we're going to do much better than that, but would rather be conservative in our figuring than over-optimistic.
Project.
One quick question, Mr. Chairman. I guess it's described, and there's a history in here about Draper Irrigation Company, but I assume it's a mutual irrigation company?
Yes, it is.
And it's, when it first was created and was irrigating farms, and now it's completely gone to secondary irrigation for yards and gardens?
There's still a small percentage, maybe 1 or 2%, that's still agriculture, but it's quickly diminishing. We feel that in about 15 years there won't be any open space left in Draper that's, unless it's been designated as open space, you know, on the hillsides and things like that. We'll be 100% built out.
Any other questions? If not, Julia?
A motion, okay, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion that the board authorize and commit 66.2% of this project cost up to $3 million, and that the project be purchased at 1% interest rate over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $216,400.
Questions on the motion?
I'll second it.
Kyle, second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Luck.
Thank you very much.
Excited about your project. Next, we have the Bear River Canal Company. Curtis Marble, President.
Yes.
Trevor Nielsen, General Manager. And Chris Slater, Civil Engineer. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. Ben, you're going to make a presentation, I believe.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The Bear River Canal Company is located up in Box Elder County, and it provides irrigation water to approximately 66,000 acres of land in Box Elder County, stretching from Cutler Dam to the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge and Brigham City there in the south. And it manages approximately 130 miles of canals to deliver water to shareholders. The Hammonds Canal shown there on your map, you can see in the with the red dotted line there. It conveys water to shareholders located on the eastern edge of the applicant's service area. The canal in the past has experienced significant seepage losses, making it impossible for the applicant to get water to shareholders at the end of the canal. To address this problem, the board provided $900,000 to the applicant in 2017, making it possible to install an EPDM liner, which is basically just a plastic liner to stave off the seepage loss. The project was a success. In the 2018 irrigation season, the applicant was able to convey water all the way down through Hammonds Canal and reach all the shareholders along it. The project is estimated to have conserved 3,300 acre feet of water last year and will every subsequent year after. Since the completion of the previous project, the applicant's been awarded a $300,000 Water Smart grant from the Bureau of Reclamation. They would like to line additional portions of the Hammonds Canal with the same liner, the EPDM liner, and also to install telemetry equipment on another canal called Lateral A. These measures are expected to conserve an additional 3,300 acre feet of water annually. In addition to the water conservation, the proposed project is expected to provide greater control over the water distribution throughout the entire canal system and to enable the applicant to more fully deliver on their water obligations. The project is expected to cost approximately $745,000. They are requesting $379,000 from the board to assist with cost sharing on the Water Smart grant, which they've received. They're expecting to go to construction in the spring, and they have met most of the requirements for the board has set forward. So staff recommends that at this time that the board authorize and commit 50.9% of the project cost up to $379,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 10 years with annual payments of approximately $37,900. This is staff's report.
Thank you very much. Ben, any comments, Mr. Marble? Or?
Well, if you would bring the map back up, if you could.
Yeah.
There you go, right there. We were in discussion back here. This will link two other projects together. Obviously, as he discussed, we do have a Water Smart grant, so we're a little better prepared this time than we were last time. Last night we had a shareholders meeting, and we had a 65% approval vote to do this project. So we kind of run a fine wire here in order to make this board meeting.
President, the approval on that was 75% to 25.
Okay, very good. He's the numbers guy.
Or
pardon?
Of those present or of your entire company?
Those present.
And shares voted. There were those who come in with proxies and voted their proxies. And so we got an overall majority vote to do this project. Like I say, this canal's been a problem, has been a problem for a long time, and we're hoping to alleviate some of these problems so that we can deliver this water to the shareholders on the bottom of the canal. And without the help of this board, we would really struggle to be doing that right now, so we greatly appreciate it.
To clarify, on the current project will complete a series of liners that when a study was done, there was 42% loss through that area. An issue with this particular canal is there's a capacity constraint upstream with the Union Pacific Railroad, and working with the railroad's about like working with the IRS. So we've been unable to increase our capacity at that point. And so we need to make our water go further in order to make these deliveries. At the end of this canal, there are shareholders that claim to have been without water for 3 months during the summer season. Now, some of that is exaggerated, but there are multiple weeks in the middle of the summer where they do not receive their water. And so this would greatly help us from a management perspective to take care of that. Another issue with this particular liner is it goes right through the city of Honeyville. It is in compliance with the state required canal safety plan. And just one breach through a city like Honeyville could be catastrophic, similar to the issue that was experienced in the Cache Valley several years ago. So, and then the last part of this project is the automated gate that's located there at the bottom left corner of your map. That automated gate is on what we call the lateral A, and the purpose of that gate is it is a low-cost gate to essentially test out this particular automation system. Over the course of the next decade, our canal company will need to invest somewhere between $1 million and $500,000 in redoing its main diversion structures. And I'm not talking about diversion from the river, but splits in the canal. And they have aged out. The old UNI Sugar Company structures have started to become dilapidated. And so this is essentially a trial run to see if this telemetry and automation system will meet those needs moving forward. We felt that testing this out on a $30,000 project was a good way. The project is large enough to show us the improved performance, but cheap enough that if it ends up not being something that will meet our needs, we haven't sunk $1.5 million into the project as we will need to for these diversion restructures and rebuilding in the next decade.
Anything else, gentlemen? Questions from the board?
I have a question, Ben. Back to your presentation. The previous project conserved about 3,500 acres, and this is an additional 3,500 acre.
Yes, that's what I understand. Is that correct?
Questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I need to declare a conflict of interest, and because I am a shareholder and a direct beneficiary of this project. So I will recuse myself and not vote on the motion.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman, given that, unless there was another question, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Go ahead.
That would be that the board authorize and commit 50.9% of the project cost up to $379,000, and that the project be funded at 0% interest over 10 years with annual payments of approximately $37,900.
Second the motion.
Seconded. Okay. Any questions on the motion? I'd make one, project being purchased instead of funded.
Okay, did I say funded? I misspoke there if I said funded, purchased. Thank you.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Holmgren.
Thank you very much.
Himself. Thank you. That concludes our project reports today. We have a couple of new applications, but they don't need to be voted on or presented, so. We'll move on our agenda then to the Lake Powell Pipeline report. Look forward to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'll give you an update on where things are at with the Lake Powell Pipeline project. I think the last time we discussed this would have been the December board meeting. At that time, the comment period had ended on the Ready for Environmental Analysis notice that was issued by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. That was a 60-day comment period. At the end of that period, in November, it began our response period, or we could reply to those comments. And so that was a 45-day period that was supposed to end January 3rd. Given that the end of it was right during the holidays and that we needed some help from consultants in responding to that, that some of them were taking some time off for the holidays, we requested an extension and of 15 days. So our responses were due January 18th, and we submitted those on time. Ended up being about an 80 plus page response document, and then a few hundred pages of attachments to that to respond to the comments. Some of the categories of comments that we responded to were updating our water use numbers to the most current that we had released. At the time, we had previously filed up to 2015 water use numbers, and we now have the 2016 and 2017 water use numbers that were posted on actually that same day on the 18th, made public on our open water data portal. We also responded to comments about ag water availability. We had an analysis done to show how much ag water would realistically be available in that area that could be converted over the years. We touched on responding to conservation, the potential of conservation in that area, and how much we can expect to achieve through those efforts, as well as responding to questions about the economic feasibility of the project. So it was a lot of effort that went into that response, a lot of late nights and extra hours and long weeks, but we got it in, and we're happy with the content that we were able to provide. And we'll now see if there are any further follow-up questions from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I always just say FERC because it's easier. Our anticipation is that they will now begin work on the environmental impact statement, and we anticipate the draft EIS should come out sometime this summer, and if all goes well there would be another comment period following the release of the draft EIS. Comment period, chance to make any needed changes, and a final EIS possibly the fall of 2020 is kind of the timeline we're working on right now. Other efforts that we've been working on, the BLM unfortunately was shut down with much of the federal government for quite some time. We're glad to have them back in action. A couple of important items they are working on is a resource management plan amendment in Arizona along Kanab Creek, where I think we've talked about that one before. There was a pipeline, a utility corridor that had been designated that was also overlaid with an area of critical environmental concern, and the two didn't really work together. You couldn't really have one overlap the other, and so they're working on amending that resource management plan to allow for utilities to go through that area. Another item they're working on is a Section 106 agreement, and that involves cultural resources and historic properties, and how all of the interested agencies and entities, tribes could work together to mitigate any possible impacts to those resources. And so that'll be a long process, but they are kind of spearheading that effort to come up with an agreement among all these groups. We've met last week with the Army Corps of Engineers in Bountiful, and they've got a new engineer that'll be helping us with the 404 permit for that office. We also met with the Utah Division of Water Quality. We'll need a 401 certification from them to address any possible water quality impacts of this project. So those are efforts that are underway. Another item is the Fish and Wildlife Service. We are working with them to finalize the biological assessment that will be ultimately rolled into the project documents. And I believe we are close to finalizing that biological assessment. Work will continue. As I said, we're hoping to get the draft EIS out, hoping that the federal agencies can work together to get the draft EIS out this summer, and that'll be a big step for us to get that out and open for public comment and agency review, and make sure that this project is addressing all of the concerns that agencies and interested parties may have. So that's where we're at right now. I don't know if the board has any questions on the project.
Questions from the board? Guess not, Joel.
Okay.
Got it made. Thank you.
We'll
very
keep you
much.
updated. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate your work. I believe we're going to have a presentation from Craig Miller.
Yes, I believe so.
You're so excited, I can tell.
Oh, it's exciting. Let me see. How do we do this? Okay. Chairman of the board, I was asked to give you a presentation on water budgets. This is some of the activities that we do here in the Division of Water Resources to educate you a little more fully about some of our activities. So, okay, how do we do this? How does this work? I need to find out here. There we go. Green button works. Okay, so what we do is we try to get data for all of the river basins throughout the state of Utah. And we do that by dividing the state up into 152 sub-areas. And we have computer models for each of those sub-areas. And we gather data, stream flow. I'll go into some of the records. And annually, we process that data and produce reports. And we can query those reports because of how we divide up the data. We can query it by county down to 12-digit HUCs. That's the smallest unit that we have the data in. And so allows us to provide data for all sorts of things, and we'll go over some of that. We use that data for our basin and statewide plans. The data also is used to determine basic things like how much water is diverted for agriculture versus how much water is used for municipal and industrial purposes. In seconds you can see trends. It's really kind of useful for that. One of the other things that we use it for is to create graphs and charts. It turns out that in the human brain, the visual cortex is one of the biggest areas. And having taught math for a few years, thank you, Marisa. She introduced me to the math department at SLIC. I know that when you write things down on the board, people understand them more. So the visual parts of your brain do math. Animals use it for counting, all kinds of things. So graphs really help people get their hands around what's happening. We share our data with WADE, which is the Western Area Data Exchange. The USGS used this year for extracting our data for their report, which is Water Use in USA. And each area of the state, each state has their water data listed in this report. I've used it for models. We've used this. This is an example of a cool graphic from one of the models that I had on the Great Salt Lake, showing how low the lake can go if you start using too much of the water upstream. So, and we use that the water budget data to describe the depletions throughout history, and that was used to help create some of the data that I used there. So part of what we have in the water budget is reservoir data, used in models as well as in the water budget. We've extracted evaporation, inflow, outflow. We have area capacity tables for over 100 reservoirs, probably close to 150 throughout the state. We've taken queries by agencies and given them data extracted by, well, they've asked us, what is the data for this? They give us their estimates, and we've overwritten some of their numbers, and it's easy to do. It's all in a database, easily queryable. So we use that data also for compacts. So this is an example of data we might use to examine what's happening in the Bear River Compact. We also use it for the Colorado River Compact and provide that data as they request it. I believe it's on an annual basis. So some of the stuff that goes into this is crop demand. I'll explain how that's calculated. We have shortages, so we try to determine how much of an area is short and where the hot spots are for water throughout the state. And we have things like irrigation conveyance efficiency to help us with that. Of course, we talked about reservoirs, and we have data from the municipal programs that Water Rights has and that we also sponsor. All that data goes right into the water budget for calculation. So one of the interesting areas that we've used it for is depletion by crop. So it turns out that alfalfa is one of our biggest crops, also one of the biggest water users of any crop that there is. And it's kind of a paradox as to why would a state have a crop like that that's so popular, that uses so much water, when we don't have a lot of that. Turns out that many areas of the nation can't grow a good alfalfa crop. And Utah's blessed with the right climate, the right kind of soils and other sorts of things. And our alfalfa has a pretty high amount of protein in it as well, making it a valuable crop for Utah farmers. They can farm it without having a lot of labor out there, use big machines, wrap it all up, send it off. So, but there, the question was, how much of our crops or how much of our depletion is used by forage for animals? It turns out just along the lines of alfalfa, pasture, and hay, it's about 85%. And if you include those other things like grain, corn, which are also used for animals, I don't know what portion of those would be used. You know, include that, that's 97% of all of our water use. So it's great for figuring out where are we, what can we do, and people are looking at, well, what can we use instead of alfalfa that gives farmers a profit? And that's being examined by committees right now, I'm sure. So what goes into it? We get gridded precipitation and gridded temperature from the PRISM group in the University of Oregon. And this is what we've done in the past. I'll show you what we're going to be doing in the future. We have used region-specific crop coefficients developed by Dr. Robert Hill at Utah State University, used groundwater from the groundwater conditions in Utah that's produced by the USGS, all kinds of other data, gauge stream flow from the USGS, Bureau of Reclamation data for the reservoirs, inflow, outflow, and canals as well. Severe river water users, Blaine has a great source of information. Emory water users also has a similar sort of thing. We use all of those sources. We have automated programs that scrape that data and put it into our databases, and we use that. So water budgets, I believe, will be changing very rapidly to accommodate new data sources and new ways of doing things. We've used Blaney-Criddle, but it's worked well for Utah, but more accurate methods exist, and we're going to be using some gridded ET in the future. For example, this is a graph of our gridded ET from a program which extracts, uses satellite data and crop data from Cropscape from the NASS, that's the Farm Service Statistics Organization. And we've produced grids of ET for each crop, 1,300-foot grids from 1979 to present, using ASCE Penman. Other states where we may imitate some of what they do for sharing that data. Idaho has a great system for putting out their ET. They do it almost on a real-time basis. you can draw a line, arbitrary line around any area and grab their water use. It's amazing. They've spent a lot of money developing this, though. They use metric, and they've got a near real-time metric, which does it within a couple of days of processing. And they have to have a lot of processing for this. And they use their databases to calculate depletion, shortages, and address issues as they come up on a near real-time basis. California uses CIMMYS. They use satellite data as well. Their satellite data is more widely available. They use something called NDVI, which is an indication of how green a crop is. So they have other methods which are able to recognize crops with 97% accuracy using remote sensing. And almost everything is automated, and it produces it on a daily basis and helps farmers schedule their irrigation. So another thing that may happen is that in the future we may use things like AgriAir to determine what happens in a municipal area. So the satellite data that we get is far too coarse to resolve down to what, grandma is using in her garden. And so with this kind of data, we could determine how much is actually being depleted inside of cities. So in the past, we've looked at the past. We have a pretty good idea of what's been happening in Utah, but we need to use budgets to figure out how much water we will have in the future. And we figure that climate change data and other sorts of things to provide data for decision makers will be part of our future work. And a current snapshot to show what the problems today are would also be very useful. One of the exciting tools that's coming up is OpenET. OpenET is going to be a cloud-based tool which has been being developed by Google and NASA and a number of other agencies, and it will allow people to look at ET with many different methods. You'll be able to do exactly what they do in Idaho, draw an arbitrary line around something, find out what the ET has been today, what it has been for the last 5 years. Great tool, and we're looking forward to it. So with that, quick and dirty explanation. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions for Craig. When you were presented the slide with the water use by the different crops, I think the answer is obvious, but I just wanted to make sure. Alfalfa was the biggest water user because it is also greatest in acreage, isn't it?
Yeah, there's more acres of alfalfa than anything else. That's true.
So you're not evaluating what the water use per acre or per ton of alfalfa is that way?
Well, we have a good estimate of what the water use per acre is in each area. If that's required, we could produce that.
I mean, alfalfa versus wheat or corn or something.
I don't have those numbers with me, but okay. Yes, we could extract that if that was the question.
And do you have any way of evaluating success or non-success of cloud seeding?
That's not part of our water budget at the moment. If Candace were here, she'd say yes. But that's not my lane. So, but we're hoping that cloud seeding gives us more water. Absolutely.
Thanks, Craig.
Oh, thank you.
Chairman, I got a question. Just dealing with lots of tools, and I can see the value of looking at it from different ways. Are there any behind-the-scene movements to use a water budget to try to re-adjudicate areas with water rights?
Water rights has their own tools, and in the past, it's amazing that we talk to the people downstairs and that they talk to us. So we may share data and help them out in the future, but right now there's not a lot of data exchange to adjudicate water with the Division of Water Rights. It's something that I would like to see, but it hasn't happened yet.
Are there other questions?
Okay.
Thank you very much, Craig. Appreciate
you.
it. We're going to move on with our agenda then and turn the time over to Eric for the director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would like to express appreciation to Craig for that presentation. Craig heads up our water budget team, and they do a great job. As you can guess, that's a very important tool in our planning programs, and appreciate their efforts to look for new data and improve with technology and all those things. Just keep up. I would also like to say thank you to Steve Farrell for his service on the board, and if the recommendation made by the governor's office is adopted by the Senate, this will be Steve's last board meeting. Steve, you've been a great board member, very knowledgeable, and it seems like every place I go with Steve, everybody knows him. And so, very well connected, and if that was me or not. So Steve, thank you, and sometime in the future we'd like to take you and Susan to lunch, and maybe the May meeting would be a good opportunity for that, but we'll get with you and look at that. So thank you. You know, we've talked about a number of things today, and I think the one thing that we still need to talk about are the revised recommended changes to the board guidelines. You've seen these recommendations several times now in briefing meetings, and I missed this portion of the briefing meeting today, but understand that the board is ready to make a recommendation on these guideline changes that we have been talking about. And I appreciate the staff and appreciate Juliet for her role in helping to craft these and the board's consideration and discussion about those. So I don't know if there's any points that the board would like to discuss further on these.
I think we went through them pretty thoroughly
Okay.
this morning.
Okay.
Juliet was going to make a comment, I think, and had a comment.
Sure, why not? I'll make the comment. I just wanted to, and we all know this around the table here, but there's been a tremendous amount of work in the staff on coming to these recommendations. So I got to, I got a little sneak peek, and I got to sit with them as they went through the different numbers. And there's been a lot of analysis and kind of testing of different scenarios to try to make sure that there aren't unintended consequences associated with making these changes. And so just want to thank the staff for their thoughtful analysis.
Are there any other comments from the board? If not, would it be willing to accept a motion? Accept this document?
I would make the motion that the board adopt the changes to its guidelines as recommended and direct staff to update the existing administrative rules accordingly.
Have a motion, second? Second. Well, are there any questions on the motion? Are all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Board.
Okay.
And staff.
Thank you very much for that direction, and we will begin the process of updating the administrative rules, and we'll work with the board through that process too. Mr. Chairman, we have a project slideshow. If you would like to have that presented, Marisa would like to talk about the Ephraim Tunnel project.
Digging holes in mountains again, huh?
What's that?
Digging holes in the mountain
Yeah,
again, huh?
yeah, a few. All right. And then I'm gonna come up here and I'm gonna try to push the right button. Yes. Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, let me see if I can get the right thing here. I have two very young kids who are much better than I at these things, so, but they're helping me out. All right. Some of you, it's been a few years since this project first came to the board. This is for, yeah, I'm not using that one, Paul, sorry. It's for the Ephraim Irrigation Company. It's for their tunnel rehab. You know, if there's going to be heckling between basins, you know, I'll let you handle that on your own. So, but let's just start by saying we were up pretty darn high. I can't remember if I got to 10,000 feet when I was driving up there. My phone gave out before it at one point, and I thought I had a cool elevation on my phone, and then it gave out. But it's a long way up there. So it's this tunnel. So we're down just outside of Ephraim, up the mountain, going over to Orangeville. Is that right? And this tunnel, which is absolutely amazing as an engineer, I don't understand how they were able to build this thing back then and make it come out where they wanted it to come out at both ends. But this tunnel crosses, and kind of got a topo here. We've got, let me make sure, oh, sorry, we're up here. We've got these two ditches, these canals ditches that come into the tunnel and feed and go through. This tunnel was originally built by the Bureau of Reclamation. The Bureau still owns it, but Ephraim Irrigation Company has to maintain it. And the Bureau a few years ago said, you've got to fix this thing because it's sloughing too much. And I should mention, Eric Franson is here, so if you got really technical questions, I'm going to throw him under the bus and let him take care of those. It was Franson Civil worked on this. Just kind of show you, this is now on the other side of the mountain away from Ephraim, starting to go down into Orangeville, and these are some of the staging areas, and you'll see some pictures from that, and then the tunnel inlet down here. But this is what Ephraim Irrigation came to us with, and I haven't been asked yet for an amendment, so, okay. I don't know if you heard that, Barbara, to get that. He said yet. But it's taken 3 construction seasons. We thought it'd take 2. There was hopes by others that it would be 1, and we're past this 3rd one, and there's still a few things to clean up. But the board has funded under contract for $2.155 million. I was going to look up how much we have left, and I didn't look that up, but let me just kind of give you an idea of some of these numbers. So it's it's just over 7,000 feet of tunnel, so just over a mile. 693 feet are concrete lined on the ceiling. More than half is unsupported, and you'll see pictures of that. About 1,500 feet timber supported, and then about 1,000 cubic yards of rubble, debris, stuff was either removed from the tunnel or redistributed through the tunnel. They had to relocate the existing culinary pipe for Ephraim City, so Ephraim City has some stake in this too, and then install a 54-inch steel reinforced pipe through that 7,000 feet, and about 7,200 cubic yards of cellular concrete is what the estimate was. I'm not sure if it's gone. Is that about, did it end up about right? It's actually a little less than that. Oh, look at that. Look at that. So show you some of the conditions. So these are the two, the ditches where they come in, and right in this area right here is where you'll see the work on the inlet that I'll go here. So that's the inlet, 1937. And so this is where a lot of the work that you'll see was being done. This is the outlet. So going now, if you looked from here, you'd see down into the Valley of Ephraim. As you see, someone is standing up in there. You can't stand up the whole way, and he was a little bit over 6 feet tall. It might have been Ben Merritt in there. So you can stand up for a while, but there's a lot of points where they couldn't stand up in there.
And still there?
What's that?
Is Ben still in
No,
there?
we fished him out. We told him we were leaving in 5 minutes, and he didn't hurry. We were out of there, so told him to meet us on the other side. But this is some of the scenarios that they're dealing with. They have worked to clean things up and try to patch things up as they've gone along. But that's some of the timber supported, some of the concrete lining, and you see the culinary pipe here, and some of the unsupported areas. Just kind of a lot of sloughing and a lot of mess and concerns about total collapse of this. So just kind of take you through some of what they're dealing with, some good old electrical, and then, you know, the seepage coming through. And I just really liked this graphic. I thought this was really neat. So I don't read very well. Okay, so the straight up and down lines, vertical lines, that's where the wood supporting the timber is. Concrete lined is this. So the non-filled area, that is all unsupported. So that is all unsupported that somehow they drilled through and got through back in the early 1930s. So a pretty impressive feat. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm going to take that back. A little bit on here, you can see some of the rubble, some of these lines. Here's some of the rubble here. A lot right in through here, as you can imagine, stopping up the flow of the water. So you can see some of that all along in through here. All right, clean out phase. They actually, the tracks were still in there inside the tunnel. They were able to extend out. Unfortunately, they didn't actually get any kind of motorized anything to pull it out at the beginning. As you see, 4 men, one guy would stay out for safety, and near the end he would run in there because they had a little bit of an uphill there battle, as you can see them doing that. And so this was the process, and they had this very small space to work in because, as you recall, the 2 canals feeding in there are right there. And so here's what we look like when we're cleaned up. And the hard part is, Eric, did it slough much off season? No? Okay, so they were able to clean up, and thankfully there was concerns about coming back after the winter. And Eric, what was the time frame that they had finally get snow melt before the snow hit again? July-ish?
Irrigation season, they want to take advantage of all of the water, and so they waited until the water was done coming through before they could start. So it wasn't just
okay.
Snow melting, there was some extra water coming, and so it was maybe 1st of July, middle of July when they would start, and the snows would come in September.
Yeah, so pretty short window to do this work. A couple other people from our office, Ben, got to go down and get in the train when they finally did have a train. Some of us weren't invited. So the culinary line, they had to move one of them, and then they have added a second culinary line for some redundancy for the city. So there it is with 2 culinary lines. Pipe install. So that's that area I showed you on the map where they, you keep driving down the dirt road and come around, you think you're there, and then you think you've gone too far, and you finally come around and see all that pipe, and you go, oh, okay, I'm here. So a lot of pipe there. And that's still a few hundred feet away from the site. And so they'd have to get them in on this dirt road, which they cleaned up a little bit, and then they'd get these rollers on the pipes to help push it through the tunnel. So it was great that they could still use those tracks. So this is some of the work, bringing those 20-foot sticks. Eric, 20 foot. And I'll try to point out, there's some holes up here on the top. This was to help with the cellular concrete from inside the pipe going out into the annular space. I told Paul I was worried about this being sideways. Our IT guy said, no, just tell everybody to turn their heads. They'll be fine. I'm just teasing you, so. Yeah, it was Carmen laughing. So that was their little, and then this one's cool too. So we got some video pulling that puppy down, and it's set on the rails to push in. And as you can see, they only set one at a time because they just have so little space to work with. If you're a construction nerd, this is like heaven for a work day. So they had to set up their own shop up on top of the mountain. That's on the inlet side. They actually had to move, or outlet side. They actually had to move it at one point to go to the inlet side to have the concrete going through both ways. And on this one, they are hundreds of feet away down this road to get to the outlet and start doing. So there was a lot of hose going in. Is that you, Ben? That's Ben. Safety, I appreciate that. Wearing your safety stuff. So in this one, they're actually pumping right here, Ben, out into the annular space. So, and this is what they're working on to stabilize that pipe. And so, I think that's it. That's back to the inlet, looking a lot better. So that is some of what the board helps with. So it didn't just help the irrigation company, helps the town of Ephraim because that is a very important part of their culinary system. And now they have 2 culinary lines, so they have some redundancy there. So, and no funding from the Bureau to repair. That was for the irrigation company to figure out. So it's great that the board's been able to help out with that.
Thank you, Marissa.
Yep.
Awesome.
You guys don't always get to see that fun stuff.
Comments from the board or anything?
Yeah, sorry. Or questions?
One question.
Eric.
No, this is an easy
Okay.
one.
All right.
I can't think of complicated questions.
Oh, okay. Good. We're on the same page.
USR, is that United States Reclamation? What does that stand for on the front of the tunnel?
Soil, no. What? USR, I don't know.
Okay.
That is a great question. We'll have to ask. I don't know.
Ask a hard
I didn't
one.
even think of
Couldn't
that.
be answered.
Yeah, sorry. It was complicated, Charles. So, any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Else, Eric? No.
That ended my report and ended it on a good note, so.
Anything else from the board? Audience? Not. We'll move for adjournment. Well, Jim, that's a good thing. Okay. Thank you for attending, folks. Appreciate it. Next meeting's in St. George, where it's warm.
Oh, it'll be too hot then. One down.
I'm gonna go down. Plus, you know, we have family laws.
St. George, or will you not be seen there?
Yeah, it works out really well. It's been a good group.
Kyle Stevens, Kaysville area. Yep. Good.
Wayne?
Nice meeting you, sir.